So what we do for the car park is we enable it to be shared between different users whenever it's not in use.
Welcome back to a Kiwi Original, the show where we feature uniquely Kiwi stories contributing to New Zealand's future. On today's show, I'm joined by Toby Litten, who is the Chief Exec and founder of Parkable, for parking that doesn't suck. And we all know parking sucks when you can't get a park close to where you live or where what you need to do needs to get done. And that's certainly the case in more and more CBDs around the world. So first of all, welcome, Toby, to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with a basic question, which is, why does parking matter, and why have we been doing parking all wrong to date?
Yeah, I would say basic in terms of the problems that people experience, right? Like parking's hugely emotional. I'm sure, many of the people listening to this would have had that horrible customer experience in regards to parking, not being able to find places, paying a fortune, being ticketed, towed, fined, having to run out from meetings, running late to meetings. All that stuff is contributed to really by, in our view, a terrible, terrible use of space and a terrible, terrible sharing of space between participants. And so we think it's really important, A, for the human experience. That's kind of piece number one. B, for the world, there's so much asphalt getting laid and concrete getting poured into car parks that go unused most of the time. It's terrible for the environment. There's more and more vehicle miles being driven as a result of people circling the block, looking for car parking, congestion created. At the moment, a lot of that's petrol-powered congestion. So there's big environmental reasons in addition to the human reasons why parking, we think, is really important. And also when we think about city design and city aesthetic, there's all of this empty space that perhaps we don't need quite so much of if it's used efficiently, which can make our cities more livable and a better, more attractive place to be. So that's why we think it's important. And really we think it's broken in many regards because there's a long answer. It comes down to, the built environment hasn't really adopted tech until very, very recently. And parking is part of the built environment. So we see technology as being a big part to play now in technology adoption in terms of solving the problem.
And I guess we've seen that in terms of the A to B transport, places like Uber. I remember hearing a stat from them saying, 20% of the world's big cities is tarmac, it's parking. And 95% of the time those cars are sitting there idle, inefficiently, unproductive, not doing what they're designed to do, which is to get people from A to B. How does Parkable help in a way that I guess the audience will understand what Uber does? What does Parkable do with not the car but for the car park?
Yeah, so what we do for the car park is we enable it to be shared between different users whenever it's not in use. And this might be, you see those reserved signs all about town. When you're driving around, Parkable would tell you which one of those are going to be free, and therefore you can park in it, with the permission of the owner, if you will. So that's kind of public parking on Parkable. We also do heaps in the private space where businesses who have heaps of car parking under the building that might belong to the chief executive or the partners, those spaces get shared with the other staff of a business when the chief exec's away or when the partners are away or whoever's got use of those parks. And that's, when you think about it, public parking is really only a small part of a city parking scape. That private parking is the lion's share of it. So sharing that between, staff members of a business or members of a gym becomes really important.
Okay, so if I'm an employee of a company and let's say we've got, 25 employees, and there is usually, 3 car parks for staff and maybe a couple for visitors, what change would I expect to see if my manager or the company I was working at rolled out Parkable for its employees?
So what would happen is the employers would get Parkable on their phone, or they'd download Parkable, and they would get to see whenever that park was empty or going to be empty. So they could reserve a space for tomorrow, for example, or if they're coming into work for the afternoon on a flexi time arrangement, they could see that the park's available now. And rather than go and park around the corner or down the road, they can just drive it onto the building. Some cool tech features that we like to show off as well, things like being able to access the building from your phone or just by your license plate, so you don't need to worry about swipe cards and whatnot to get in. Things like that we do to make life a bit easier. And the same goes with visitor parking. Those visitor bays that might be empty, as a visitor coming to see your business, often customers, very important customers, you can show the availability and allow them sort of, we like to say, frictionless access to the visitor bays, to reserve them, to make sure they've got access to them, that kind of thing.
Nice. And where have you found early success so far in New Zealand and or abroad?
In New Zealand, everywhere where there's car parking, we're enjoying pretty good success here. We've got a big presence in Auckland and Christchurch, and a relatively early presence in Wellington. A lot of what we do is with corporate customers, so big businesses like KPMG or Datacom, many people are familiar with here in New Zealand. Offshore, we're working with companies like Vodafone and big property owners, big listed property groups, things like that, to help them improve the parking experience and the asset optimization.
So a lot to still do then, because there are a lot of corporate headquarters that have car parks that I'm assuming don't have Parkable yet.
Totally, yeah. It's a global challenge, and yeah, we're just getting started.
When you did decide to get started, what was the problem you saw, or the thing that decided for you to go, actually, I'm going to take this from being a problem to a solution? Because it's, everyone knows car parking is a problem, but not everyone goes out and develops and launches a parking app. What gave you the impetus or the confidence to take that huge jump?
Yeah, some would say a moment of madness. I'd say a moment of frustration. For me, it's really about that human pain that I talked about before. That was enough to having seen other technology solutions solve human pain, particularly in and around the sharing economy at the time. That was enough. That was the motivator. It was like, hey, I really identify with this problem. And then we started to look under the surface. We realized that the problem was real, and it was commercially a big enough opportunity for us. That was important. And we managed to get together a team of 3 of us to get started, and who were all sufficiently motivated.
Super cool. And I see from your website that you've got a couple of developers, one on the Android side of things, one on the iOS side. Were they with you from the start? Was that part of your team of 3?
No. So we had one developer to start with, who's co-founder and CTO, Brody. We had another guy who was he's a bit of a sales machine, to be honest. He would just go around and knock on doors and convince people that Parkable was a great idea, and myself to kind of clean up the rest. And then very quickly we realised that the product needed to be built out. That's when we recruited our first 2 additional developers at that point.
And is all the development done within New Zealand?
Yeah. We believe, in a business like ours, development is one of the kind of core parts of our competitive advantage, our ability to build great products. So we like to keep that in-house and keep it at home.
And in terms of the actual app development itself, how difficult was that, given that you're not just developing it for a website, you've actually got to develop it and then go through Apple's App Store, get permission there, same with Android, then there's the updates of phones. What type of challenges did you have to overcome?
Yeah, there's, on face value, it looks like it's pretty easy, right? People list a space and or make it available, and other people find it and park in it. But technically, there's quite a few challenges lurking under the hood. And I think about in the early days, we actually had a problem with Apple approving our app because they thought it was illegal. So there was a few interesting notes backwards and forwards between ourselves and the App Store controllers. Really, it's a complex piece of software now. We get into all kinds of wonderful things like sensing and detection of vehicles, so that's living in the world of Internet of Things, and how does the physical world interact with the digital world, and lots of technical challenges in there. And it's one platform, but kind of delivered in many different areas. So we live in WeChat in China. We live in the App Store and Google Play Store here. We live on web. So it's a pretty complex bit of software.
Hey, just a quick interruption. Thanks for watching a Kiwi original. If you're liking this episode, then hit the notification button, and that means you'll see when every new episode gets released. We've done 40 already. We've got another 50 lined up. Right, now back to the episode. Do the customers that pick it up, these corporate headquarters, do they know that it's New Zealand coded software, or are they just picking it on the App Store because you've got local representation there, or a reseller, or you're doing a local advertising there? How do they find out about it?
It's different. So a lot of our sales and marketing efforts are very targeted. We, in New Zealand, there's definitely a local story and a desire to support local, but offshore, our customers don't. As much as we love New Zealand, they really don't give two hoots. They want to choose the best in class, and thankfully that means they choose us most of the time.
Right. So there's not necessarily any advantages or disadvantages by saying you're a Kiwi software company. They're just looking for best in class or something that's going to solve the problem they've got to do with parking.
Yeah, certainly offshore. That holds true. In New Zealand, I think we get a bit of home court advantage. There's a real genuine desire to support local here in New Zealand, and we're super grateful for that. That allows us to treat New Zealand as our test bed. It allows us to refine our ideas and our product with amazing New Zealand customers. We're super grateful for that. But offshore, it's it's really, you've got to fight to win. And as you say, thankfully, touch wood, we're doing that a bit at the moment.
And in terms of what's next, I was looking online prior to this interview, looking up, what are valuable car parks, and in Auckland they tend to be around $80,000 to $100,000 for an owned car park, but overseas, some of these parks, I saw one in Knightsbridge for £300,000, or one in Hyde Park for a couple of £100,000. This is expensive real estate. Is that part of the type of customer that you're looking to pick up? Is there a sweet spot that you've identified?
Yeah, it's incredible, right? The cost of a piece of asphalt in various parts of the world, it blows our mind. And really what that trend indicates, what we're seeing is car park values, the real estate that's car park values is growing at a slightly faster rate at the moment than other forms of commercial real estate, which is super interesting. What that means is the owners of these things, whether it's a single bay, like we're describing here, or actually our perfect customer, which is more a very large corporate owner or corporate property developer, they're kind of our larger customers, as you can imagine. What's really important is return on investment for that asset. So that return on investment comes in two ways. One, am I making money from this asset if that's my desire? Or two, is it being used, more important to us, is it being used as much as it possibly can be to support the building that it sits under or on, or whatever the case may be? And so two key drivers. One is utility, and that leads to a better experience for the building users and the occupiers and the tenants and the staff of the tenants. Or two is, if it's supposed to be generating money, is it generating as much money as it can? And we help deliver both of those things.
So it's really, it's a utilization app, isn't it, to maximize utilization of that square meterage that just happens to be tarmac, whereas a company like Airbnb, which a lot of people would have heard of, it's about utilizing that spare real estate that you can rent out as a nightly accommodation, tourist accommodation. But I guess, had anyone else thought that you could do this with car parks before you, or were you the first?
When we started, we thought we were the first, and it turns out we just did a terrible job of competitor assessment. So at the moment we sort of embarked on our global journey, we realised that there were some people who'd been doing this for a while, and there's a number kind of in the two key categories that we play in, the public parking and the private parking. There's some great people doing a wonderful job in various parts of the world. We're fortunate at the moment that we're competing really strongly and winning in many instances, so we're really happy about that. But yeah, it was not a busy space, but there was certainly 3 or 4 key competitors globally.
And when you're winning against those guys, do you have a clear reason, or do you know what your sweet spot is against those competitors?
Yeah, we spend a fair amount of time making sure that we understand and stay constantly in front, and really we try and win in two key areas. One is making sure we've got the best product, and that comes back to that. Keeping the software development capability in house, and making sure we're very close to our product. And the second is making sure customers love us, right? And so for the customers that we win, we work really, really, really hard in investing in that relationship and investing in supporting them, so that they tell all their friends, and that tends to be a pretty good mix.
And I guess that is part of the story, isn't it? Because looking on your site, there is a commission that gets paid to Parkable if you've got these parks, but also you're taking away a lot of the paperwork and the hassle. And usually when you've got corporate headquarters or a commercial lease, the parking, although it's valuable, it pales in comparison to the actual value of the lease of that to that commercial tenant. So a lot of the times it just gets that money just gets left on the table, and so you're actually making that money easy to earn for a commercial landlord.
Yeah, you've got it. Exactly. Easier to earn, and for the tenants, making the most of the space that they're paying for, right? And by allowing it to be full all the time without upsetting the people who have kind of priority use rights. So that's a big part of it. But also just on that admin thing, right? That's what the technology piece is all about. We hear a lot of stories about people having arguments in car parks, and it sounds awful. But we counted up the other day. We reckon in New Zealand we've saved about 2,700 car park arguments, automating problem solving inside the car park. So that's pretty cool. We think. Yeah, stopping that kind of disagreement.
That's interesting, because the car parks is a functional aspect to it, but then there's that kind of non-functional part, but very important, that sometimes gets missed, which is it's a status symbol. If you're in a company and you've got a car park, you're at a different role or level to someone that doesn't have a car park.
Yeah, that's right. And trying to crack that code, or crack that culture is super, super important. We think, workplaces these days need to kind of work really hard to attract and retain good talent. That means moving away from these hierarchy-based kind of cultures, where you're more junior to me, therefore I'm better than you. And the car park used to represent that culture, so we're really keen to blow that sort of old system away.
That's awesome to hear. I think you're certainly onto something, because anytime you put technology around valuable assets, and there's not much that's more valuable than real estate in any form, whether it's commercial, residential, and car parks go across both, then those things become a way of utilizing an asset that's got high value. So it'd be really interesting to see where you take this. Is there any plans that you can share now, or is that kind of close to your chest to keep them away from what your competitors are doing?
No, absolutely. For us, it's all about growth at the moment, and we've got a young but great business growing in Australia and New Zealand, and kind of just getting started in North America and China. So for us, that remains our focus. Really keen to sort of spread our wings and start to win customers in these new markets. That's it, really.
Cool. And for those commercial property owners or building facility managers, what's the easiest way to get started if they want to go down this road with Parkable?
Super easy. We can just come in. The best way is for us to just come and showcase the software, really, and then it speaks for itself. So we can do a demo or introduce it to people, give them a trial on the system, and what we find is kind of once it's in, people love it and it stays.
That's great to hear. Like, if you've got a sticky product, then that reduces the whole churn side of it. Probably goes back to what you were saying there about making sure you've got a product that's fit for purpose and something that customers love.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, well, I wish you all the best, Toby, and thank you for making yourself available today for the Kiwi Original. It's super important that we share these stories, particularly ones that involve software that not everyone in New Zealand is going to necessarily need or use, but certainly when you're making the most of the real estate on this island and helping export technology, that's something that everyone can be grateful for. So thank you very much for your time today and for what you're doing.
And thank you so much for having me. Awesome to chat.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Toby. This has been a Kiwi original brought to you by the New Zealand Made team. Thanks for watching. The New Zealand Made trademark is used by over 1,200 businesses in New Zealand. The New Zealand Made team licenses that trademark. Check if you're eligible at bynz.org.nz. If you feel that someone should see this, share it with them now. Otherwise, subscribe to youtube.com/bynzmade, and we'll see you on the next episode.